3, 2, 1.
I'm calling to order the regular meeting for the Police Accountability Board for Wednesday, July 24th, 2024. To access this meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using this URL listed. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 826-5339-6072. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of this agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. Being our second meeting of the month, we are making our land acknowledgement known and moving to agenda item number 1, our roll call.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, this meeting was called to order at 6:34 p.m. I'll now proceed with roll call. Chair Moore.
Here.
Vice Chair Wilson. We were informed is running a few minutes late. Board Member Blackaby. Present. Board Member Calavita. Here. Board Member Cayetano. Was granted a leave of absence. Board Member Leftwich.
Here.
Board Member Moses. Here. And Board Member Williams was also granted a leave of absence. On behalf of the ODPA, we have Director Aguilar, Investigator Horton will be joining us later. Myself, Policy Analyst Murillo, and remotely we have Investigator Wechter. On behalf of the BPD, we have Deputy Chief Tate present, as well as Lieutenant Montgomery. On behalf of the City Attorney staff, we have PCA Hylas. On behalf of the City Manager's Office, we have Dr. Cariana Redondo and Assistant to the City Manager and DEI Officer Rex Brown. Chair, with that, we do have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Jose, and welcome all. I appreciate you for all being here. And this takes us to agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes, additions, anything that needs to be known? This is our time. Not seeing or hearing any, do we need to take a vote?
Yes, could I get a motion in a second, please?
I move we approve the minutes, or I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. With that said, we will now proceed to public comment. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time. If there are many speakers, they may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. With that said, I'll start with those who are physically present before moving on to our virtual attendees. At this time, are there any members of the public who would like to provide public comment? Okay, seeing none, I will now move on to those attending virtually. Okay, first up, we have Ms. Carol Denny. One moment while I start the timer. You have been granted permission to speak. You have 3 minutes on the clock.
I am the person who was involved in policy complaint 2023 PR 0007. Would you prefer for me to speak when that comes up in new business or now?
We will have time allotted for you to speak during new business.
Okay, then I will wait, and thank you.
Thank you. At this time, is there any other virtual speaker who would like to provide public comment? Chair, I see no additional hands raised.
Thank you, Jose. That takes us to agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes.
Sure. I had a couple of just quick comment. I know on the closed session items, I was just in the minutes. And Jose, just remind me, the first, I'm not going into the details. The first one it says is to reject findings for 3 and accept for 1, 2, and 4 in case number 2023 CI019. And the next section says motion to accept the findings for case number 2023 CI 0019. So is there a duplicate or a different number there?
One moment, let me just turn to that page.
It's 15 of the packet.
Oh, sorry, there was an original motion that had failed. And then the second one that was carried.
Got it. Okay, that one, now I understand. Great, and then in the fourth part there, I think there's just an extra hold, so motion to accept would be the fourth.
Okay.
At the end of the closed session?
Yes,
Okay, that's it. So I just, with that, so I guess, with that edit, I just say edit to remove the word hold, otherwise it looked like. Thanks for the
Perfect.
clarification.
thank you.
Can I get a motion for the approval of those minutes with the edits?
So moved.
Sorry, oh, I just noticed so it says that the first motion carried with 2 ayes and 4 nays. I'm going back to the closed session items again, I apologize. The first one says that motion carried with 2 ayes and 4 nays, and the second one failed with 4 ayes and 2 nays.
Okay, we'll make that correction to the record.
So just, yeah, so clarify how that went down and then, okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
So I second with those edits.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not seeing or hearing any disputes to that, so I'm gonna move us on to agenda item number 5, ODPA staff report. Director?
Good evening, Chair and board members, fellow staff members. Just want to also have the record reflect, we have our summer intern, Chloe Park, present as well from our team. This is her last week. She's been doing phenomenal work, so we appreciate her her interest in being with our office and contributing to the work we're doing. I wanted to provide some brief updates to the board members. I reported a few weeks back, probably a few months back, that we had a candidate going through a background check for the data analyst position. We had to discontinue that candidate, and we do have another candidate that will be going through background. So that background process takes about a month or so. So hopefully by the time the uresis wraps up, we can have that a new staff member on board with us. The proposal for the new office location formally went to council for its reading, and on the consent calendar, there was no opposition to it. So we remain on schedule. We can be sometime in the new location in September. Hopefully we can be in there by the time you return from your recess. So we're working on that. The updates on reports and letters to council, we submitted the military report letter that was approved by the board at the last meeting. There was some interest from community members about some of the elements of the report. And there was some commentary last night at the council meeting. There was also some acknowledgement from the council members and appreciation about the work that the board is doing on that regard and reviewing those documents. We are finalizing or updating the downtown task force report with the supervision of the subcommittee, so we can transmit that to council. I did speak with the mayor's office today, so we would be looking at a presentation when they return from their recess. So it'll be a few weeks out, a few months out. NACO updates. The registration is still open. We have some board members have expressed interest, so we're in the process of procuring those seats. If you're interested, please let us know. There's also a webinar tomorrow. It's called Using the Intersection of Policing and Social Justice to Strengthen Stakeholder Relationships. That is now closed. But if you're ever interested, we do also have, we reserve those seats so we can view it here as an office. So if you ever miss the cutoff, you can come to our office and view it here. So tomorrow, it'll be a discussion about the Citizens Police Oversight Commission in Philadelphia and how they're doing strengthening relationships with the key stakeholders in their community. And we also have an update. Our very own Jose Murillo is the recipient of a presidential scholarship to attend NACO. He hasn't been there yet during his time with our office, so it'll be his first experience there. We're excited that he was able to be selected for that.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Very
cool.
Now I want to pass it off to our friends at the city manager's office if they have any updates before I take any questions.
No updates from me at this time. I'll be giving a short presentation briefly, but I'd like to pass the mic over to my colleague, Rex, for any updates.
Thank you. Just one update. I'll be attending the International City County Management Association Equity Summit tomorrow and Friday. And if you have any input and feedback on the Society of Human Resource Managers removing equity from their title of work for equity, diversity, inclusion, and now be just D&I, let me know. I'm interested in what a lot of the public is interested and tuned into is going on in this new vision by some for equity, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you.
What was the rationale for that? I didn't know about that.
As I understand it, there was some controversy about the issue of application of fairness within the work, and in order not to enter into any discussion about the politics of that, they wanted to focus on the work itself, but more to come, obviously. We'll be discussing it quite a bit tomorrow.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm ready if the board member have any questions for our office.
I was wondering, Director, at the presentation of the downtown task force, did you get the impression that that would be a special meeting or part of the regular meeting of council?
I understood it will be part of the regular meeting at this time, so we just have to monitor those deadlines.
Any other questions for the director? Okay, not seeing or hearing any, I'm gonna move us to agenda item number 8, chair and board members report. I'm going to also be the tip of the spear here and say, Rex, please lean on me for this discussion on equity and what equity is and how we can have that conversation. I'm prepared to speak on that. So please, I would love to engage. That also being said, I'd like to give you guys a few announcements. Myself and the director will be heading to New Orleans, August 9th through the 13th for the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Executives. I am looking forward to that conference and the network and the access that it provides. And I look forward to reporting back to you guys. I won't see you formally until September, so that will be the first thing that I talk about as I come on back. That being said, this is the last meeting before our break. So this is my opportunity to say thank you for your work. This is a well-deserved month off. Please use it to rest, restore, re-energize, and come back and do the work. Also, you know, have a great summer. That being said, any other board members, now is your time. The floor is yours.
I'll just use this opportunity to just briefly give an update from the amazing trip that I took to Washington, D.C. with Director Aguilar, and just to compliment the value of the connection to that network that he had in the community there. I think we had some really interesting discussion both with the chair of the DC Police Accountability Board, as well as a former chair and members of the community that came out to George Mason University for some really interesting discussion about evidence-based policing. So yeah, I would highly encourage folks to tap into that space and that network. The variability, like this is an example with Washington DC meeting once every 2 months, I think, if I'm not mistaken, compared to how often we meet, is quite surprising. But at the same time, I think that much larger staff that's doing quite a bit of work. So it's interesting to just see some different models that were out.
Thank you, Board Member Moses. Anyone else? Not seeing or hearing anybody jumping at the bit here. I'm gonna keep us moving to agenda item number 7, which is the Deputy Chief Tate's report. How are you doing, Deputy Chief Tate?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well.
Excellent. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to start by sharing a few cases of interest that I feel are important not only to highlight sort of the variety and magnitude of cases that our officers handle, but to also touch on the work that we're currently engaged in with the PAB as we're working on the revisions to our vehicle pursuit policy. That said, these cases that I'm going to share also are frequently part of community conversations regarding things like catalytic converter thefts and some of the brazen tactics that we're seeing thieves employ these days. The first case happened on July 18th. The call came in about 5:40 in the morning, and a witness reported seeing suspects stealing a catalytic converter in the 1600 block of Julia Street, and they were said to flee in a gray vehicle. Couple minutes later, the victim reported that he interrupted catalytic converter theft in progress. So same day, couple minutes later, in the 1600 block of Oregon Street. And during that incident, one of the suspects brandished a gun at the victim, and there were a total of 3 suspects that fled in what they said was a dark, newer 4-door sedan. An officer saw 3 males flee in a black sedan in the 1700 block of Stewart Street after attempting to steal a catalytic converter. The officer initiated a vehicle pursuit of the suspect vehicle on the 1600 through the 1800 blocks of Alcatraz. And at that time, a suspect who was seated in the driver's side rear seat pointed a firearm out the window at the officer. The vehicle pursuit went on to Highway 24 westbound and then to 580 eastbound, where they got off on Broadway and Webster. And at that point, our units lost sight of the vehicle and the pursuit was terminated. The next case occurred this past Saturday on the 20th. Just before 6:30 in the morning, we got calls of a catalytic converter theft in the 1600 block of Euclid. That one involved at least 2 suspects, and one of the suspects brandished multiple people with a firearm when they tried to intervene in the theft. And there were also 2 witnesses that reported hearing possible gunshots. One of the responding officers spotted the suspect vehicle fleeing the scene. Pursuit ensued through the Northeast Berkeley Hills. And during the pursuit, another suspect stood up out of the sunroof and threw a car jack and a glass bottle at the patrol vehicle that was following in the pursuit. The bottle shattered the patrol vehicle's window. After losing a tire on the suspect vehicle, they abandoned their car at Wildcat near Woodhaven, and they took off on foot into Tilden Park. One of the occupants was detained after a brief foot pursuit that went down an embankment. And at that point, because we felt that there was a high probability that the outstanding suspect had a firearm, we requested the assistance of an outside agency to support us with a canine and drone assets to help safely locate the second suspect. Unfortunately, they were able to escape. That investigation is still ongoing. The suspect vehicle was coincidentally found to be stolen, and there were no injuries as a result of that pursuit. Earlier in the year, we had reported more or less a disturbing trend where suspects were using firearms to brandish victims and witnesses who intervene in catalytic converter thefts. And typically in those cases, an armed lookout will threaten people who try to stop the theft. And we felt that we should take this time as a reminder that we don't recommend interfering or engaging suspects who are involved in these crimes, and that the best thing that the community members can do is to call the police and provide as much detail about the suspects as well as their vehicles if it's safe to do so. So that was just sort of very connected to the work that we're doing with the PAB, and felt like it was also very important to talk about the types of cases that our officers are navigating right now. Moving on, last meeting you had asked for an update on the camera installation project. I'm very happy to report that that process is underway around the city right now in the city right of way. ALPRs are going up, and we expect that process to continue for about the next 3 to 4 weeks. And of course, we have to follow that up with department-wide training so that we can make sure that our officers are prepared and ready to handle those calls as they come in. Unfortunately, we were not able to put together a response for the bike force report, so our apologies on that. I understand that you guys are moving forward with that, and we'll do what we can. But at this point, those are all the comments and updates that I have, unless you have anything for me.
Does anyone have any questions for the Deputy Chief?
Deputy Chief, thank you for the report. I was under the impression at some point this year, catalytic converter thefts were down. Are they back up again? Sounds like what you're seeing.
We are seeing a rise, yes.
So I think the original decline had something to do with the shops that were receiving them having been maybe found out and terminated, and I don't know, is there now ongoing investigation about that, or?
So yeah, several months ago, there was sort of a fencing operation, if you will, where there were a multitude of arrests around that. You know, it only takes time for something to build back up. So I think that might be what we're seeing right now. And yes, there are ongoing investigations into all of that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Deputy Chief Tate, thank you for the update on the cameras. Appreciate the follow-up on that. Another follow-up on the catalytic converter question. Without going into the details of the investigation, I'm curious, like, do you have any sense of the size of the group of people that's carrying this stuff out? Is this a handful of people, a bigger group? I'm just curious about how getting to the frequency, but also how big a group of people are we talking about? That's one. And the second question, as we're, talking to people in the hills, I know we're not near an area where there's as much frequency of crime as there are in other parts of the city, but there is this sort of sense that we're a little bit farther away than where often resources are. And people are wondering is, visibility, are there other things we can do to deter some of the catalytic converter activity up there, knowing that we're also a little bit farther away from where most of your resources are deployed? Like, how do you guys think about that and options for dealing with that, knowing that you also got to concentrate your resources in places where there are higher incidents of crime, but we're a little bit farther away. So kind of related questions about that catalytic conversion.
Sure. I think it's too soon to say how big it is. I think as the investigations unfold, we learn more about how suspects are interconnected and where the fencing may be happening. And so I think it's going to take a little bit of time to learn how and where the catalytic converters are being sold and whatnot. So I think we're just going to have to wait and see on that. As far as the distance is concerned, the one nice thing about the city of Berkeley is that we're structured on a beat system. So in theory, you should have a beat officer somewhere geographically close to any area within the city. So I think it's as far as the prevention, there are things that we have done, such as putting serial numbers or vehicle identification numbers on the catalytic converters, which was something that Councilmember Hahn had sponsored with some of the local automotive shops last year. I think it's too soon to say whether or not we've seen any success in that, but it certainly makes it more difficult for folks when they go to sell them. Unfortunately, I think we're just going to have to, it's sort of just be vigilant when you hear the noises. If you have an opportunity to call, hopefully we can get there as soon as we can. some of that stuff is just challenging. I know that there are some automotive shops who offer some sort of anti-theft devices for the catalytic converters. So those are certainly things that folks can look into.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chief Tate, for your time.
You're welcome. Good night.
Good night. Which takes us to agenda item number 9, subcommittee reports. Jose, can we go through the list?
Of course, and just for the record, it's item 8. So we will go ahead now with subcommittee reports. I'll go down the list. The regulation subcommittee.
Board member Lefwich and I have met in the past with the negotiators with the union, and we're waiting to find out when the first actual negotiation meeting will happen.
Thank you. Fair and impartial policing. I don't believe this had any recent activity.
No recent activity.
Okay, the same goes for the surveillance technology policy subcommittee. Okay, policies and practices relating to the downtown task force. We acknowledge that there are some staff items that we're currently working on. Is there anything else?
No.
Okay. Body worn camera policy committee. Okay, conflict of interest. Go to the policy reviews committee.
Yeah, so we are, as Deputy Chief Tate mentioned, we're focusing on the vehicle pursuits policy and working with her and with Sergeant Spielman, meeting regularly. It's just very complicated and very time consuming. So we are making progress, but it's stuff.
Budget and metrics.
Say, we've had a back and forth on some metrics. I think we're nearing a point where we could probably share it. I belatedly shared some feedback today with Board Member Wilson. We're iterating on something we're getting ready to share with the board for feedback.
Thank you. Outreach and engagement.
Not at this time, but by September, we'll have something good planned.
Off-duty conduct. I don't believe this had any recent activity. Operations and processes subcommittee.
I have belatedly, in fact, just today, sent an email following up with some work that Lee and I are doing. So, the board member chair, Vice Chair Wilson and I have been working on. We'll have something in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Chair, those are our subcommittees.
Thank you very much, Jose. And now we can get to agenda item number 9, new business. Starting with A, discussion and action regarding policy complaint 2023-PR-0007 in accordance with section G, policy complaints and reviews of the PAB standing rules. Let's go.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The material for this particular item can be found on page 20 of the agenda packet. Brief context as to this case. This case was brought to you back last year, or was brought to you last year. It had been the decision to either accept or reject the policy complaint had been deferred until the associated personnel complaints have been concluded. Those complaints have now been wrapped up. So we're bringing back this policy complaint back to you for consideration. We presented within the memo, we provide just a quick factual summary of the events, as well as some of the attachments in the complaint form provided by the complainant, as well as a preliminary analysis as to what potential areas should the board consider this complaint, what could be looked into as part of that review. And our recommendation here was that if the board does decide to accept it, it should be assigned to staff to continue the work. And of course, we do have to go through the standing rules, section G particularly. We'll be granting the complainant 5 minutes to speak, as well as a time allotted for a public comment afterwards. There'll be time for board members to ask questions, as well as a moment for the BPD to provide any additional context or response that they may have. With that being said, unless the director has any comments.
Now, at this time, Chair, do you have any comments before?
Not at this time.
Okay. With that said, I do have the complainant, Ms. Carol Denny, with us in the webinar. I'll be granting her permission to speak. And in a few moments, I'll start the timer for 5 minutes once Ms. Denny is ready. Okay, Ms. Denny had been granted permission to speak.
Hello?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay. I just want to thank you for at least being willing to consider this policy complaint. This complaint was based on just my intuition that something was going wrong with the way I was being treated by the police. And it was upheld by the appellate court only a few months ago. I was assisted by the Family Violence Appellate Project, who got affirmative decision from the appellate court that not only did the court violate my rights and the law, but so did the Berkeley police violate my rights and the law by allowing my abuser access to the property. There's actually, I'm not sure you can see me, but if you can, there's about a page and a half of the Family Violence Appellate Project brief that you need to look at and consider so that you can alter Berkeley Police's policy regarding elder abuse restraining orders. They do not understand the law and they are abusing people's rights. I've spent 6 years and I'm calling in from 3,000 miles away, still unable to go safely home. And it has affected my life in a profound way. I've been able tonight, only hearing about this hearing 2 days ago, to write you a letter, but I'm able to offer you the resources of the Family Violence Appellate Project, who asked me to say they're glad to provide you with these tables of authorities and clarify for you any part of the policy that has been so thoroughly violated for over 6 years of my life. Please help me and help the people who come after me never to go through what I'm still going through. I can still not go safely home. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll open it up to public comment if there are any additional speakers. In just a moment, the board will have the opportunity to ask questions. So just one moment. At this time, are there any members of the public who would like to provide public comment on this item regarding the policy review, either physically or virtually? Don't see any physical speakers. Are there any members of the public attending virtually that would like to provide comment on this particular item, item 9A? Chair, at this time, there are no hands raised for additional public comment. The board may now proceed to ask questions of the complainant or to clarify from the BPD any potential policy.
Thank you, Jose. Going to open it up to the board members. Board member Leftwich.
Yes, I have a question, and I don't think it was in our materials, but Ms. Denny referenced the Family Violence Appellate Project, and there was some litigation that was resolved in her favor. So if she could provide more information about that, unless staff is familiar with that and could provide that information.
We didn't receive that as part of the initial policy complaint, but if Ms. Denny wants to speak to it, we're happy.
I would like to speak to it. This only happened a few months ago. I believe it was in February. We received an affirmative decision from the appellate court in San Francisco that not only had the judge robbed me of my rights, but the Berkeley police enlarged the danger to me by allowing my abuser complete rights to all aspects of my property under the guise of in-home support services. This really needs to be addressed by your your commission, I guess your board is the appropriate way to call it. Because since the very little that I've written about my own 6 solid years of experience has enabled me to hear from community members all over Berkeley and Oakland who are suffering the same kind of abuse and have abusive people allowed onto the property in the guise of a workplace through in-home support services. That's what has happened to me. Please, as a part of a policy complaint, under the law, if there is a violent attack on someone, that is not allowed. You are not allowed to argue that my home is someone else's workplace just because I live in an apartment building. And
Thank you so much, Ms. Stinney, for that explanation. I just wanted to ask, do you have access to this appellate court ruling, and can you send it to our board?
I already have. I've done that twice. I'm surprised you don't have it as a part of this hearing. I am shocked. I've sent it to several of the commissions who I assumed the Commission on Aging would care. The Commission on Housing Advisory Commission should care. So many
Ms.
people
Stinney,
are
I
affected by
care,
this.
I care, and I'd love to see that document if you were able to provide that.
Can I ask
I
Chair
have
if,
already provided it. I'm
Um,
glad to provide it
excuse me.
again. It's just that it seems as though someone is not receiving it at your end.
so, excuse me, Ms. Denny, Chair, and Board Member Leftwich, are you asking to receive those documents because you think they'll be dispositive or informative as to your decision about whether or not to accept the policy complaint? The policy review? Because I would say, I think that's the question on the table today, and perhaps if we do accept it as part of the assessment process, staff can make sure to receive that decision. And if it's okay with board members, I would suggest, moving forward with staff's recommendation. I don't know if it's actually staff's recommendation, but make a recommendation to accept the complaint. I just have some clarification that I'd like to understand. The complaint, the policy you point out, I think is policy 313. That would be subject to the review. And I'm not clear if that policy covers also the circumstance of the senior being protected by a restraining order. Because there seems to be two things at issue, and I just would want to make sure we were able to fully address all of the issues raised.
I completely agree. That's why I thought maybe the appellate court ruling would have already put some of this together for us.
I just want to make clear, this is an elder abuse restraining order, which is unique under California law.
Okay, so that's one question I have. If policy 313 covers elder abuse restraining orders, another I have is for the policy committee. I just want to make sure policy 313 is not on your list.
No, I don't believe it.
Okay, all right. So I'm prepared to recommend.
I am curious if BPD has any insight into that question of whether the elder abuse restraining order is covered under the 313 policy. But
I can't answer that. I don't have my computer pulling up real quick. Yeah, I don't have a direct answer to that. I can find out.
Just to follow up on Board Member Wilson, as I was reading the analysis, because I agree with there were sort of the two pieces. It's the restraining order enforcement as well as the potential abuse of elders, independent adults. And as long as we weren't limiting that inquiry by focusing on policy 313, I thought looking at both would be appropriate. And that was right at the beginning of the preliminary analysis section. So as long as we don't feel like we're binding ourselves by tying it to a specific policy and being able to go on both directions, I'd be supportive of that policy review.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I would
Don't we
also
have
be,
to bind ourselves to a policy if we're doing a policy review? That's why I'm asking. If we don't, then that's fine, but I thought we did.
Director,
If I may, so one of the things that we try to do proactively is when we screen it, so the standing rules require us to bring it to you. So we've been doing a cursory review based on the complainant's narrative, and we try to provide some preliminary analysis of where you can go with it. I don't know that this is binding, so this is more or less kind of guiding potential areas of analysis, but it's also again, the issue with the misnomer of policy complaint. So the board has ability to look at policy, practice, and procedures. So even if there isn't necessarily policy proper, it could be part of the procedures of the department.
I would make a motion that we do accept the policy complaint and describe it as examining the enforcement of restraining orders, including those protecting elders. So it would be general enough.
I'm gonna second that.
I second that.
It's all right.
The motion was presented by Board Member Calavita and seconded by Chair Moore.
As an addendum to that, I would move to accept the recommendation of staff by assigning at least the initial policy review to ODPA staff.
Okay. And Chair, do you still second that motion? with
I
the-
do.
Okay, perfect. With that said, I'll now proceed to a roll call vote. Board Member Blackaby,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Board Member Moses.
Yes.
Chair Moore
Yes.
and Vice Chair Wilson.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. The policy complaint has been accepted. Thank you for your time. Ms. Denny, our office will be in contact with you.
Thank you.
And with that, we go to agenda item 9B, continuation of the discussion and action relating to the interconnection between the Specialized Care Unit, SCU, and the BPD.
I was hoping, Chair Moore, if I could just start out, because I think we've had some internal conversation about this item, the update, bringing it back. As you all are aware, we had a helpful update on the SCU a few meetings ago. We asked some follow-up questions. We got some information via email, but now we're having this back. So I just wanted to take a few moments to frame for the board why I think this topic is an important one for us. So I reviewed the RFP for the SCU, and what it said in that RFP is that as part of the reimagining public safety process, the city has been engaged in research and planning for an SCU that will ultimately become a 24/7 mobile unit designed to respond to and support people who are experiencing a mental health or substance use crisis without direct involvement of the police. The SCU will be different from the city's current mobile response in that there will be no police involvement. So that's one data point, that this was intended to be a diversion effort for those with mental health and substance use issues. Then we have from the city auditor's audit of police calls, and I don't have the date there, I think this was 2022. The city auditor's audit of the call volume. We have an estimate from CAD data that about 12% of unduplicated calls, the city auditor could describe as a mental health call. The city auditor notes that it's very difficult to make this estimate because at that time, the department was not specifically coding calls as being mental health related. And for a number of other reasons, the auditor indicated that that was probably an undercount. But what does this mean? Certainly for us, I'm thinking about my role recently reviewing the department's budget. If the SCU is fully functional, potentially something like 12% of calls could be redirected from the department in the first instance to the SCU, and that would most certainly impact the budget requirements for the department. And so I wanted to just put that out there, why I think it's important and why we should care that this is fully functioning. With respect to dispatch, we had why am I forgetting her name? Andrea Pritchett came to speak to us several meetings ago and really sounded the alarm bells on the redesign of dispatch that's supposed to be occurring. That's something that my understanding was funded by the voters through Measure FF several years ago. Very little progress has been made on that. But in that redesign of dispatch, we are supposed to get a system whereby you call 911 and the call through that one-stop shop could be diverted to SCU or BPD as appropriate. So that's why we care about the dispatch redesign. Ms. Pritchett noted that that hasn't occurred, and that one of the reasons I guess that some advocates feel the pickup on the SCU has been slow is because there is a separate number and it's difficult to access the SCU. So I just wanted to frame all these kind of seemingly disparate issues to say why I think we should care about it as the PAB. Thank Dr. Arredondo for coming and updating us, and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to just pass out, I did some hard copies as well of the presentation. I'll use some for and then I also wanted to share the SCU brochure and updated cards. Just keep in mind the hours are ramping up. So right now, the hours, we need to get you brochures printed. There. Now get started. Right. So good evening, members of the Police Accountability Board, city staff, and community. Thank you for being here tonight. And for those of you both in person and online that may not know me, my name is Cariana Arredondo, and you can call me Carrie, and I use she, they pronouns. I joined the City of Berkeley team almost a year ago in late August, and I have the privilege of serving our community as an assistant to the city manager that focuses on all things reimagining public safety. So this evening, I will be presenting an educational overview of 3 key projects outlined here within the larger Reimagining Public Safety Initiative. Next slide, please. Or maybe scroll, there we go. So this slide provides an overview of what I will be presenting on this evening. Up first is a high-level status update on the city's reimagining efforts that includes some background related to our phase timeline and where you can access staff's spring 2024 update. From there, I'll spend some time on these 3 initiatives that fall under the larger umbrella of reimagining public safety. You may also hear me abbreviate it to RPS for brevity. And then from there, I'll provide an overview and update on the specialized care unit, crisis needs assessment that's looking at that CAD data, and dispatch needs assessment. With the takeaway for folks getting a clearer understanding of the scope of each project and how they overlap and may differ from one another. In addition to this, I'd like to highlight big picture considerations and next steps within RPS before we close out with the Q&A. And last but not least, I did want to note that while I am presenting on behalf of the team driving these projects forward, any questions that I'm not prepared to answer today, I will bring back to staff along with feedback and comments received today. And these will be taken into consideration for our fall 2024 status update. That is going to likely be a special city council meeting. We haven't landed on a date yet, but it will be in the fall. Next slide, please. All right. And quick disclaimer, apologies for all of the text. We're doing PDF, so it's all appearing at once, but feel free to let your eyes settle on it. So for those unfamiliar with the background of reimagining public safety and its early beginnings, I did want to provide some context in response to the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the nationwide call to reevaluate and reimagine a new public safety paradigm. the Berkeley City Council passed an omnibus motion in 2020. And this motion initiated a comprehensive and inclusive process to reshape our public safety system. So on the bottom, you'll see phase one. Phase one focused on laying the groundwork, incorporating community input, and conducting comprehensive research, which led to the publication of several reports and recommendations. So during this period, the city contracted with field experts, including the National Institute for Criminal Justice Reform and Resource Development Associates. We also convened a Reimagining Public Safety Task Force that included both appointed and at-large members. City departments engaged with our consultants and task force members. And as Vice Chair Wilson mentioned, the city auditor produced a report on Berkeley's Emergency Communication Center. And during this period, Resource Development Associates, also known as RDA, they were contracted and tasked with designing the framework for the specialized care unit, while the fire department early on began to engage a consultant for the dispatch needs assessment. So in phase two, the city council reviewed the reports and recommendations and incorporated budget referrals to advance our reimagining work. So this included continuing work towards the dispatch needs assessment and initiating a crisis needs assessment, which I'll talk more about in a minute. However, I do want to highlight that citywide vacancies in Berkeley caused delays in the implementation timeline. And some of these projects, as you'll note, are being continued into phase three, which is meant to run from July 2024 to July 2026. So for those of you that would like to review more details on the full scope and progress of this initiative, if you scan that QR code on the slide, it will take you to our May 2024 spring update. With that said, I'll be focusing on the specialized care unit crisis needs assessment and dispatch needs assessment this evening. So next slide. All right. And again, this is meant to be largely educational, so we can get a sense of how they differ from one another, but also how they overlap. So the specialized care unit, also known as the SCU, is Berkeley's first independent crisis response team. The city of Berkeley has contracted with Bonita House as the SCU service provider, and the SCU responds to nonviolent crisis calls without direct involvement of law enforcement. So these crisis calls may include both substance use as well as mental health crises. And on that brochure that I handed out, they provide a little bit more information as well for when to call. The next slide, please. As I had mentioned, last time we talked about this, each team on the SCU has 3 people, 1 EMT, 1 peer support specialist, and 1 clinician. And the SCU operates 24 hours on Sunday through Wednesday from 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Thursday through Saturday. So community members that are experiencing or witnessing a crisis can call the number on that slide there. Just reading it into the record, 510-948-0075. Save that number in your phone if you can. So call them during operating hours, and during non-operating hours, you can also leave a message. So typical SCU services provided include safety planning, conducting a clinical assessment, and then providing transport to local community-based organizations or the hospital, among others. SCU services are voluntary, and clients can choose to refuse the services. And I do want to highlight that because there are assessments underway to better understand how the SCU fits within the larger framework of dispatch, 911 cannot dispatch to SCU, but the dispatch center is aware of the SCU and, if appropriate, can recommend that a caller may instead reach out to the SCU. There can be rare situations that require a response from Berkeley Police or the Berkeley Fire Department to assist the SCU. So these escalations to BPD have happened when, for example, a client may be disorganized in their thoughts and that they're unable to maintain their own safety or they're unresponsive. So SCU services may need to escalate to BPD if the client is presenting a danger to themselves or others. They may be escalated to the fire department if the client is exhibiting a medical emergency that requires emergency care, such as stroke symptoms, for example. Next slide, please. So then shifting gears and talking more about the crisis needs assessment, the focus of the crisis needs assessment is to analyze 911 call data to assess calls for service that could apply to the specialized care unit and other crisis programs. So the city of Berkeley has contracted with Resource Development Associates, also known as RDA, who was the initial consultant that supported with the design and implementation plan for the specialized care unit. Next slide, please. So getting into the nitty gritty of where we're at with the crisis needs assessment, RDA evaluators are collecting and analyzing primary and secondary data to support this city of Berkeley to conduct the crisis needs assessment. So this is looking at computer aided dispatch, or CAD for short, data. In addition to this CAD assessment, RDA is also evaluating the first year of the SCU pilot program. So the objectives guiding the evaluation include quality improvement. So how can we identify opportunities to enhance SCU services by providing specific 911 call types that could be routed to the specialized care unit or other crisis programs. Another component is assessing results. So that might include providing recommendations based on the data analysis for increased effectiveness of crisis call response options. So the RDA team is working with the City of Berkeley, Bonita House, and other key stakeholders to gather data to inform this assessment. As it relates to the CAD assessment, the data that RDA is looking at includes 911 computer-aided dispatch data. They are doing sit-alongs at the communication center, and they are also shadowing the police department in the field to track the progress of the dispatch call. And just as a quick aside, as it relates to the larger specialized care unit evaluation, RDA plans to look at the grant reports reviewed for the Crisis Care Mobile Units grant, raw program data that Bonita House collects in their system. They're doing key informant interviews and then focus groups to do sort of a larger evaluation of the SCU pilot program as a whole. So RDA is currently evaluating all these data sets, and we expect to have an initial draft of the report available in the fall. As it relates to the final plans and expected outcomes, the ultimate goal is to optimize the categorization of crisis calls to dispatch the SCU and other crisis programs. Next slide, please. Right. So now looking at the dispatch needs assessment, I like to look at this as the CAD or crisis needs assessment is 911 specific, whereas the dispatch needs assessment is more systems wide and like very through a holistic lens. So the goal of the dispatch needs assessment is to evaluate current fire and EMS dispatch capabilities in order to make recommendations on implementing a priority dispatch system that follows nationally recognized standards. And those standards might include pre-arrival instructions, dispatching of alternate resources, staffing models, infrastructure, software, training, quality improvement, and assurance. So as I had mentioned, in relation to the crisis needs assessment that's focused on call categorization, specific to crisis and behavioral health calls, the dispatch needs assessment evaluates dispatch through a very holistic lens, from literal infrastructure, staffing, to software, and how do we optimize our dispatch system. Next slide, please. And then as it relates to an overview and sort of implementation timeline, the City of Berkeley collaborated with 2 consultants to examine our existing system-wide dispatch capabilities and to develop this gap analysis and path forward. So the ultimate goal is to, again, establish a sophisticated dispatch system that can process calls according to nationally recognized standards. So ultimately, this system aims to route the appropriate resource, whether it's a fire response, ambulance, specialized care unit, advanced medical unit, nurse navigator, or even another resource to the call for service in the correct order of urgency or priority. So while the overarching goal with dispatch is send the right resource to the right call at the appropriate priority level, there are other elements within the dispatch needs assessment, such as protocols, training, staffing, and overall an increased dispatch footprint that are also critical to achieving this goal of meeting national standards. So these assessments are providing a roadmap outlining what needs to be done to reach sort of the desired end goal. And staff are planning an update on this specific assessment in our fall 2024 Reimagined Public Safety update. Next slide, please. And I know I did a lot of talking and detail on the crisis needs assessment and the dispatch needs assessment. So you'll notice we updated the presentation to include an assessment at a glance. So I won't necessarily go into the nitty-gritty detail of the data evaluation since I talked through that and you can kind of see the cross comparative analysis. But I do want to highlight something that I haven't talked about yet, which is the challenges and considerations related to both of these assessments, which are also included in our status update. So as it relates to the crisis needs assessment, some major challenges and considerations that staff need to take in mind is just this level of resource awareness in terms of understanding the current dispatch system and utilizing, reports that have gone out, new data to get a better sense of sort of the holistic assessment that we're working on and that RDA is working on in partnership with us. So as the project progresses, recognizing new data sets is really essential for a comprehensive analysis, and that might impact the project timeline. I know folks are a little frustrated that these assessments are taking time, but this is a testament to the sense of thoroughness and due diligence that we're wanting to implement with these assessments. In addition to resource awareness, keeping in mind new data sets, there's a level of partner coordination. So, coordination with multiple partners is necessary to ensure that all information is gathered. They're looking at 911 CAD data, RDA is doing sit-alongs at the comm center, they're doing shadowing of PD to actually track the progress of the dispatch call. So these are all considerations that need to be made. Shifting over to the dispatch needs assessment, some challenges and considerations that I wanted to highlight is, yes, there are unanticipated delays. The original study was delayed due to contractor availability, and ultimately the validation study provided a deeper analysis of improving the efficiency and easing sort of the implementation process, but that ultimately resulted in a 14-month delay. Again, we're looking at staffing levels, call volume by day, other reports, the literal seating configuration of a dispatch center, looking at emergency versus non-emergency call volume. So with all of this in mind, looking at dispatch from a holistic approach, as it relates to the implementation plan, there does need to be sort of a consideration between, hypothetically speaking, do we identify the space first and then staffing, or do we first ramp up staffing and then, build out space, center, software, and so on and so forth? So these are all considerations that could impact implementation. In addition to that, there are legal and labor considerations for implementing these recommendations if we are changing dispatch. And then the last but not least component is budget. While Measure FF provided funding for the dispatch needs assessment, ultimately the Berkeley Fire Department budget or even Measure FF is not going to cover all of the recommendations. We need to identify strategically what budget is going to cover implementation of these recommendations like infrastructure, software, staffing, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to share how these considerations fit within the larger shared considerations and challenges that we've identified sort of through that holistic lens of the umbrella of reimagining public safety. So as it relates to staffing vacancies and attrition, due to sort of high turnover for a stable workforce, that was something that also, it almost reads as a domino effect. Because there were staffing vacancies that impacted the implementation timeline for a lot of these assessments. And because that impacted the implementation timeline as we went into this fiscal year for new budgetary recommendations, because these assessments were still underway, that's something that we need to take into careful consideration for ongoing funding once these reports are available and these recommendations are being considered. And then last but not least, thinking about regulatory compliance and as it relates to legal and labor considerations. Next slide, please. And where we're at in terms of next steps before we open it up to Q&A, I just wanted to note that, this summer we're continuing the phase 2 work, transitioning into phase 3. My anticipation is that these assessments will be complete with the exception of the crisis needs assessment. And we're not sure if that's going to be ready by the time we're delivering our fall update, but ultimately we will be providing a more comprehensive update on these assessments during our Reimagining Public Safety special meeting. So I'm here to receive your comments, questions, and concerns. And again, if there's anything that I'm not prepared to answer today, I will definitely take it back to staff and we'll incorporate that into our next status update.
Thank you, Dr. Arredondo. I'm going to open it up to our board members, but before we start, I'm going to pepper you with a few, if you don't mind. So right now, when we're talking about the dispatch for the SCU, where are those calls being pushed to, and do they have a dispatcher that right now is just focused on their work? So
the way that folks can be in touch with the SCU is by calling that number.
Right.
So 911 does not dispatch.
I'm asking for the 510 number. I'm asking what happens when I call that number.
Somebody from Bonita House or within the specialized care unit will answer that call, assess the situation, and then from there we'll dispatch the van.
Anybody else? Board Member Moses?
Yeah, I'm gonna pepper you with some questions here. So, right, you said that 911 can't send to the SU, not that it doesn't, but that it can't. Can you expand on that? Like is it just a systems restriction or is it a policy restriction?
That's a great question. I will take that one back to staff, but my understanding is at the moment, the reason why there is a pause is because we're doing these assessments right now to get a better sense of sort of the implementation plan for call categorization. And then for the dispatch needs assessment, I know that's more holistic. So I think right now, because these assessments are underway, that's why we have that direct number, because it's completely non-associated with law enforcement. So
in terms of the assessments, how is the RDA assessment review and the data review different than the 12% that Vice Chair Wilson just shared earlier in the analysis that it sounds like already happened, the CAT analysis that already happened to dispatch data?
So as it relates to RDA's CAT assessment or the crisis needs assessment, this is going to be sort of a more in-depth look compared to the city auditor's analysis. So this is going to be my understanding is it's going to be more nitty-gritty into the data. But also in addition to looking at the 911 call data, that's why they're doing sit-alongs at the communication center, and they're doing ride-alongs with the BPD to see the full lifeline of dispatch.
Okay. And my understanding is the SCU right now is grossly underutilized as sort of its biggest challenge. That with just the phone number, we're not getting about. What was the impact of that needs assessment? So they learn all of the different types of calls and understand that process. What changes about the goal and the initiative that we have to try to increase those initiatives?
I mean, I think the ultimate goal is based on what the crisis needs assessment in conjunction with the dispatch needs assessment. The goal is for, in RDA's report and recommendation early on is that the specialized security unit should be dispatched via 911. And that's why they're doing this assessment and digging into the nitty gritty of the data to support that recommendation. Yeah.
So it's two different reports to foster.
With more in-depth analysis and data, to support it. That's my understanding, but I can definitely confirm with, HHCS and the fire department that are leading these assessments.
Two more questions, I'm sorry. What is BPD's role or partnership in this effort, seeing as dispatch is with BPD? What is their involvement in this process? Are they leading that assessment of dispatch at all, or is it completely separate?
My understanding, as it relates to the, there's a partnership, and as it relates to the crisis needs assessment, for example, like RDA has to, partner with BPD in order to look at the CAD data. So they're working, I believe, with, Arlo, to receive the 911 CAD data and review that for call categorization. They're going to the comm center for shadowing and things of that nature. As it relates to the larger dispatch needs assessment, my understanding is that there's, level of sort of stakeholder engagement, interviews, like there's connection with that because we're looking at dispatch on a system-wide level. Even though fire department's leading it, the dispatch center is going to be impacted by it.
That's how the fire department is really leading that initiative of dispatch, reimagine.
Yes, they are the lead for that one. But one city, one team, we all work cross collaboratively.
Let's see what team. I love that. We should say that every meeting. One last question. You said that people can refuse service. Do you know what % of calls people are refusing? What happens when they do?
That's a great question. I'll have to connect with HHCS to get that answer for you. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Board Member Lethbridge?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how many calls for support have been received by the SCU and what are the outcomes of those calls?
Great question. I need to pull that up. I don't have that immediately available, but give me 1 second. Or if possible, I can provide that to you afterwards. But I want to say in terms of the calls, I can definitely state off the top of my head since they've been collecting data as it relates to 5150. I want to say that, and unfortunately, I don't know the total number of calls that have been received by the specialized care unit, but I believe there's been less than 30 5150s, which is relatively low. So ultimately, the goal is to be able to go out in the field, provide support, refer to either a community organization or hospital, things of that nature. The ultimate goal is not to 5150, but in the grand scheme of the calls received, we try not to 5150, and it's relatively low.
And what are the current hours of operation?
It's on the slide.
I thought you said this was outdated.
So on the slide, it's 24 hours Sunday through Wednesday, and then 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Thursday through Saturday. However, I do want to note that Bonita House, our provider that is the SCU, they're making progress in terms of staffing up for full teams. So my anticipation is that we are very close to going to 24/7.
And I guess I was wondering, without knowing, my assumption would be that calls would be greater late at night than on the weekends. I don't know if that's the case, but it looks like that's, at least initially, that's when that hours were not cut.
Yeah.
And is that because of staffing?
Yes, it's based on that. I know it's based on just the availability of staff for those hours.
So I sense some frustration in Board Member Moses' questions. And I feel frustrated too, because it seems to me that we're postponing really doing something now that we know needs doing. And I'm all in favor of research, but I don't know when all of these assessments will be completed. But I know several of us have sat in on dispatch and we've done ride-alongs. And it's unclear to me why the 911 number, if a person calls 911 and clearly simply needs a welfare check or a wellness check, why that can't be, is there no way for the dispatcher to call the SCU and send them out there? I don't understand why much of this can't be done immediately instead of waiting for the nitty-gritty details of some of this happening. I mean, when I sat in on dispatch, there were so many calls that had to do with welfare checks. Why can't they just shift them over to the SCU? Is this a union question, or what is the holdup?
I definitely think there is major, legal and labor considerations that we need to have included in sort of like the full scope of this. But ultimately, I think sort of the reports and recommendations of these assessment underway, like once we, in terms of the timeline, our goal is to be able to present to City Council and the community at our fall 2024 update. So I don't want to make any promises, but we're aiming for October, sometime in October, to get that update and then can go from there. But I understand your frustration.
Why is it so difficult for the dispatcher to transfer it to the SCU? It's.
I don't think we should shoot the messenger. I know.
I'm just trying to find an answer to the
Can I ask,
question.
I think a question here is Bonita House and their capabilities here. Are they able to handle, well, who are they? And what kind of staffing are we talking about? I know you said they're up staffing. Are they coming from 0 to whatever it takes to serve Berkeley, or who is Bonita House?
Question. So my understanding is, as it relates to, like, the team consists of 3 individuals. And again, I will do my best to answer what I can, but ultimately I have the subject matter experts in the room, and I apologize for that. But my understanding is that there was a slow ramp up for the specialized care unit based on availability and hours. I can't remember off the top of my head what the full staffing level would look like, but I know, I don't want to misquote, but I know there's a handful of teams per shift and each team consists of 3 individuals. I don't know off the top of my head what the full staffing level would be, but last I heard is that they're waiting to fill 6 positions to be fully staffed for 24/7 operations.
If you Google Bonita House, which I'm sure you've heard of, but it's been around since 1971, providing psychiatric services.
New to me. That's all.
So they didn't, they didn't just kind of ramp up to do the ICU.
Go ahead.
They've been around for a long time.
Give Dr. Ardono brief break, question for BPD. So in the field, if there's a call for service in the field, an officer comes upon someone who's in crisis, remind me again, how did they escalate in the field? My understanding is they don't call SCU either. Well, who do they call? They call BMD, who do they call?
We tend to use Berkeley Mental Health. So
Right.
we've had a long-standing co-responder model with Berkeley Mental Health.
And that's what I remember from the other discussion. So my other full question in all of this, is there's also this overlap over here, which is then what's BPD doing? What are they using? Should they be using this or not? Like, And that, I don't think is anticipated in any of this. But that was my other question that came up earlier, is like, well, should we normalize on one? What do we have parallel or competing, mental health services for people in crisis? One is initiated by people who call directly. One is initiated by officers in the field. Should there be two different, or should there be one? Again, this is to take back and think about how do we look at this, but that also doesn't look like it's being considered. And that's where
Well, I think that, if I may, I think that's where the, crisis needs assessment comes into play, because it's not looking at just call categorization that applies to the specialized care unit, but other crisis programs, which can include, the MCT.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I didn't see that in here, and that was the one thing, because I've been thinking about before in this discussion, I just didn't, I think. So I don't want to belabor, because the crisis needs assessment looks like it's looking at 9/11 call data, not necessarily looking at what officers are doing in the field. So I just want to be super clear that that's part of this somewhere, because that just I haven't heard it. Thank you.
And I'd point out one thing too about Berkeley Mental Health, the mobile crisis team. Us calling them, in your scenario, what does an officer do when they run into a mental health crisis? That's what we do.
Right.
But Berkeley Mental Health has that's a small part of their mission. They have caseload management, they have proactive work they do without police officers in the field as well. And it's probably a large majority of their work is without police or police officers.
Perfect. Yeah. It feels like we have bits and pieces of these various things, and it feels like there's efficiency somewhere in that, but I just have zero visibility.
I do think, but you are touching on the duplicative effort of Bonita House and Berkeley Mental Health, but I will point out that as was quoted by Vice Chair Wilson earlier, that the police not being on the scene is written into the piece, which is why why I don't think that SCU, Bonita House, would work as the co-responder model for policing.
That's fine. Yeah, it's fine, but it just feels like we've got multiple touch. We've got dispatch. Are we dispatching to one or the other? You've got people in the field going maybe one. It all feels way too complicated. It
And
feels
expensive.
And expensive, yeah.
I think this came up at our last, I think it was our last meeting, about the potential duplication of the mobile crisis team
Right.
and the SCU. So I think that's a real fundamental question.
Yeah. And that's where these assessments, like the crisis needs assessment, will really be telling in terms of the call categorization and how this applies to the SBU, how this applies to the mobile crisis team, how this applies to other sort of crisis services in terms of that triaging related to mental health and behavioral crisis calls. So it is looking at it at a holistic level, and I think where it can be a little bit murky is because with the crisis needs assessment, we have RDA conducting that assessment, but then they're also, in addition to that, doing an evaluation of the SCU pilot program. So while it may seem like they're solely focusing on the SCU in the crisis needs assessment, it is looking at call categorization and triaging to other programs in addition to the SCU.
So I just want to make sure that I have this right from the last time, that I know that you don't have the exact numbers, but my understanding is we're looking at less than a call a shift on average for SCU. Is that roughly correct? Less than 3 or 4 a day, 5 or 6 a day, like.
I think it would be more than that, but I can get the exact number to you once I can with the team.
But my understanding is it was very under-resourced, that we had people ready with a van ready, but no calls coming in, whereas we have 12%, literally hundreds of calls that are viable. So I just want to sort of make clear for the record, Dr. Arnando, that there's a lot of work being done here, but the thing is getting those calls that make sense to the people sitting there ready to do them, right? And if that's something that I think to Board Member Calahita's point is as simple as an alignment with BPD dispatch of a procedural change of when somebody comes in and meets XYZ criteria, that the dispatch calls the SCU number and doesn't call dispatch, and that's the change. And like, that little thing will make a huge difference in everything we're talking about.
Lieutenant Montgomery, may I ask you a question? Are the dispatchers part of your union?
No, they're not. They're part of local SEIU.
So we don't have a meet and confer issue with them?
But they're unionized, just a different.
I'm talking about meet and confer though.
I don't know about any meeting for with SEIU on this issue.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah. I'll find out.
So I looked over the scope, you sent the scope of the RDA evaluation, and I just want to make sure I know, you may not have the answer here. But is anywhere in this evaluation, is there going to be an assessment of the overall SCU call volume, for lack of a better nomenclature? And the relationship to the BPD call volume? Because for the service types that potentially overlap. I didn't see that anywhere in the scope of the RDA evaluation. So maybe you can check, because I think this is really what we're all kind of driving at.
Yeah.
And so I was concerned when I saw that evaluation scope because I didn't think it was in there. And we want to know that. I will say we have the benefit of having several folks running for city council on our board. And what I would say this reflects more than anything is very problematic management and governance, well beyond like the BPD. This is, I'm looking at this 2021 audit report where the first recommendation is that the BPD better identify all calls for service where there's a mental health issue precisely for this purpose. The department says, yes, we can do that within 4 to 6 months. Now we're 2024, we're spending more money with another consultant to do the analysis. This is kind of an endemic problem that I think is well beyond, what we can do. I think we, at some point maybe need to figure out how we want to stay up to date, with the updates and what's going on, but there is a bigger systemic issue here, clearly.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I just
You're in.
wasn't sure. I think, I totally hear all of your comments and feedback, and I will definitely take that back to the team. And that will be, incorporated into our next status update. And I think that's why ultimately I wanted to focus a little bit on the challenges and considerations, that second to last slide. This is taking a long time because there was an initial citywide vacancy. And because of those vacancies and not having the boots on the ground to implement these assessments and the work, that impacted the overall timeline. But please know that I am committed as the project coordinator for reimagining public safety to drive this forward and to work collaboratively, cross-departmentally with the team to ensure that we get these assessments ready to go, but still maintaining that sense of due diligence. Because ultimately, when it comes down to a systems-wide redesign of dispatch from infrastructure to staffing to software, that is a huge dollar amount that's associated with that. So there needs to be sort of careful consideration. And I know I'm focusing on dispatch, but we want to focus on the crisis needs assessment. But as an example, with the dispatch needs assessment, we just have to identify what's the most strategic approach for optimizing this in a way efficiently and effectively as possible.
I would counter that point to say, as fast as possible seems to be something that we are not considering, that this is a problem that's continued. And what works now, I think, is more important than what folks strategic, long-term, very carefully assessed. We can change as we go, but we have a problem now. Let's do something now.
Thank you.
If that's all for now,
One more very brief point. At that last meeting, we had Andrea Pritchett here, who's on the board for the steering committee. And I expected her to be here tonight, but one of the things that she was most concerned about, in addition to dispatch, was speaking about the here and now, when there is a mental health issue, that as board member Wilson read to us, the SCU was not supposed to be a dual response issue. And so the question is, you know, should the police department also show up when the SCU is there with a mental health issue? And, you know, some of us saw the video that Ms. Pritchett sent around, and, you know, it seems to be a real overuse of resources to have, not to speak of, you know, the person who's having a mental health crisis could also feel intimidated and have things escalate. So there is that issue as well.
Thank you, Board Member Calavita. I'm gonna end the discussion there. I'm gonna say thank you very much. If you could get with the board members that asked you for that data, I'd appreciate that. And that will take us to new business, agenda item number 9C, continuation of the discussion and action on the proposal to systematize board training as authorized by section 125, section 12, Berkeley City Charter. Director?
Yes, Chair Moore and board members, I apologize for my absence last week, because this is where we would have been discussing this. This is just a continuation of conversations we've been having about board training. We have updated the hours, so we're in a better position. We have several board members with the updated hours we have seen that have met the required. Not everybody's there yet, but we're at a better place than we initially considered. We have 6 meetings left after the recess. So the purpose of this memorandum is to just outline a path to get some of the training. One of the things that we observed looking at the self-reported training hours is that not everybody has been doing the same type of training. So this would be a good opportunity to get a baseline in some of the key areas. So that's where the focus would be for these next 6 meetings. And there'll also be a combination of synchronous and asynchronous. So we could spend 30 minutes, if you allow us to have some of the stakeholders, whether it be BPD or another city department, kind of lead the discussion on some of these trainings. And then on the side, you would also have some reading material or reviewing some of the videos that we have available on some of these subjects. So at this point, we just wanted to get the buy-in and see if this is what the board envisioned in terms of systemizing for the last few meetings that we have after the break. And this is on page 46 of the package.
And so Director, the idea here would be, we'd have a little time at each board meeting to do the training.
Right, so then it'll be a commitment to do some review of some material on the side, but also on the meeting, it'll be 30 minutes if you believe that's a reasonable amount of time that we could spend on some of these topics.
So some pre-read plus 30 minutes in the agenda.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
I would just say, I think that sounds good to me. I would hope it wouldn't go over 30 minutes. I think some of the past trainings ended up being kind of long, and we always have already so much business, so.
30 minutes.
I'll put my 2 cents out there that I'm not a fan. I like to be able to do training on my own time, but obviously,
Well, then, I guess,
will of the group.
could we do, what does the pre-read count?
Yeah, the pre-read would be part of it. So we could potentially reduce it. The other benefit though is of having this for broader community engagement, so they can also see the type of training that the board is being exposed to.
Just devil's advocate, could we shift the ratio then and say a little more pre-read and then 15 minutes on the agenda? Again, I'm just Board Member Wilson to your point, like 15 minutes on the agenda, but there's a pre-read where we also get credit for doing the pre-read as part of the training, or our self guide.
15 minutes, anything we do for 15 minutes is in 15 minutes.
No, but you bang the gavel at minute 16 and we're done. Anyway, that's just a thought, if we don't want to.
Or maybe reduce the number of trainings from 6 to 3. But I like the idea of building it in just so it gets done, but
Agree.
maybe 6 is too many.
And are we still doing the proposal where we are shaming our board members with their hours publicly? I thought that was part of our work here.
I would just reframe that and say we're being fully transparent, but, we didn't get a green light per se. We just got one board member that was eager about it, so we
Yeah.
reported in real time, but if the board wants, we can report that publicly.
I think that's something to consider after the break. I think that's a lot of time for us to get our work in and maybe get some hours taken care of.
I thought people were doing pretty well on the hours. Aren't they?
Yeah, and some are doing better than others. I think people have come in different junctures, so that's why the hours may look a little different.
I'm kind of agreeing with Board Member Wilson, and also Leftwich, that, I mean, I don't know that this is the best way to spend our meeting time, but I'll do obviously what anybody wants.
And I hear that as a group, but we also have to take into consideration the other stakeholders. They are concerned, and when I say they, I'm talking about our city council and the Berkeley Police Department, that our group is not getting the education that they think we need to do our jobs effectively. So this is a way of us not only sharing with the public, but also the other stakeholders who had made this a point during our city council meeting a couple meetings ago.
Based on the fact that we don't have 40 hours?
Correct. It has become a union talking point, allegedly.
But we can address that by getting into compliance and being transparent about our compliance. I'm not, I don't want to spend a ton of time, but I'm not going to vote yes, simply because I don't want to do that during board meetings. I do think there is some value to a community education effort, which I think is different. So I think if we want to do that, that we should schedule some time to do that, perhaps as part of our upcoming community meetings. But I don't even want to waste people's time talking about it, because I just think it's a philosophical difference. But I know I'm at 36 hours right now.
All right, you're close.
And I will be at 40 before we come back.
There you go.
I think some of the topics, I know, like I was looking at the first one, and I think I raised this off and on, because I think it's important for us as board members to understand, and I guess I had characterized it as spectrum of stops, about we need to understand the policies and the laws around stops and arrests and Miranda, because it comes up in our hearings also. So, as I said, maybe 6 is too many, but I think we should do some, because I think some of these issues are really relevant to our work.
Yeah, I think to Board Member Leftwich's point, the separate from are we in compliance with 40 hours is, are we well trained as a board? And I don't think that just doing 40 hours means that we're well trained. I think being trained on specific things that we don't know is important. So I wonder if there's a way also to frame the required board training, which is these 6 things or whatever it may be, that we should all know about, for example, Miranda and First Amendment rights, whatever it may be, with an understanding like that's not going to get us to 40, but that we should all get that 20 or that 15 or 10.
Which is something we could decide, or staff could decide or recommend to us, irrespective of whether that training occurs at our meetings or outside of it. I'm not opposed to some predefined set of trainings happening at the meeting like that. But even if they didn't, I think it'd be very helpful to say, at a minimum, this is the 10 core hours that everybody should take. And then, outside of that, the remaining 30 you do pick and choose.
I think that is all very important, and I would love to see how that conversation evolves. But right now, the important part is city council wants to make sure that you guys have your paperwork. So I want to make sure that everyone gets their 40 hours. We are in compliance with the charter, because right now, some of us are in compliance, but as a board, we are not. And I'd like to go ahead and make sure we just check that box. And that's not me asking, actually. That is city council, that is the union, that is the department. So my vote is that we do spend 30 minutes or so within this meeting with this educational piece. And I think all the stakeholders would appreciate it.
So we're talking 30 minutes at 6 meetings? Is that the proposal?
Director?
Yes, 30 at each of the meetings.
Maybe if we do go forward this, we could also be sensitive when crafting the agendas that is, you know, in lieu of something else, so that we're not here till 11.
That's a compromise I like. I can get behind that. Director, does that work for you?
Yes, and we're probably gonna have a more fuller discussion of this in a few items down, in the work plan for the rest.
Yeah.
Another real quick clarifying question. Are any of these 6 available in any other format right now? Like if I want to just go watch a video on number 4, could I, or are we having to kind of create all these data?
Sorry, let me look at number
Again,
4.
I'm trying just to go real quickly to board member Wilson's idea, which is some of this self-digestible if I just wanted to go watch the video.
Yeah, we definitely have material on that.
We had asked, I think I had asked a while back if the department had videos, and I think Lieutenant Montgomery said that you do. So that
I mean, that's the other idea, like
would be
I'm,
very efficient for us to do that on our own.
I'm happy to do some of these, many of these on our own if it's easy to digest and I can do it in the 1 hour after the kids go to bed or something. I can put myself to bed. But so that's another idea in terms of moving some of it off the agenda.
I mean, if you make a 10-hour Udemy course and assign it to all of us, like we can just take the course.
Have you been in contact with the department about?
We haven't finalized, but we have discussed, so we can touch base on it.
That seems like an efficient way to do some of this.
Okay. I'm gonna move this conversation along. Are we comfortable with that? Do I have consensus? I'm just gonna keep moving like we do. So that takes us to new business 9D. Discussion and action on ODPA's proposed schedule for presenting policy reviews. Director.
And I'll turn it over shortly to our policy analyst, but this is again a continuation of the discussion of where we were with some of the policy reviews. We provided a projection earlier on to the board about when we can complete some of these. And now we wanted to get the buy-in of the board to be able to accept this calendar for the rest of the year of when we could present these. We try to keep it to 2 per meeting. And those are the projected presentation timeframes that we'll have. And we also try to prioritize in a way that makes sense for the subject matter in each of the policy reviews. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Murillo to provide more context.
Yeah, so again, as the director mentioned, this is really our proposed schedule as to where we see being able to complete these policy reviews. Earlier, several meetings ago, we had proposed sort of a projected timeline as to what the status of the several policy reviews were. We're coming back with this timeline after now that we've really gone through every single case in detail and seen the documents that we have, the information that we still need, and overall just planning out what each review would look like. So these timelines have to take into consideration that planning as to when we anticipate that they'll be done. These particular ones are the ones that are currently assigned to our office, absent of the review that was adopted today. But again, it's what we projected to be manageable for the rest of the year.
Any thoughts?
Just informational. We don't have to vote on it.
Well, it was our proposal. This would be something that we'd plan out for the next agendas, sort of picking up that slot while we're here. So we were seeking.
Yeah, unless you had a different vision of how to do this, if you want to spend just one entire meeting where you hear all the policy complaints, but we'll try and space it out.
Yeah.
I think it looks good, and I would love to hear what my colleagues think. And if we could turn this around and get it off this agenda item quickly, that'd be great.
Move we support this plan and for future agendas.
I second.
Okay, I'll proceed to the roll call vote for the motion to adopt the proposed schedule for presenting the policy reviews. Board Member Blackaby,
Yes.
Board Member Calavita,
Yes.
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes.
Board Member Moses,
Yes.
Chair Moore,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Wilson.
Yes.
The motion carries.
And that will take us to 9E, discussion and action on adjusting the PAB's work plan for the rest of the year, identifying topics to address before the year end. Accommodations, policy reviews, board training, annual retreat planning, annual report preparation and review, 2025 regular meeting schedule.
What are we being asked to do here?
So, I think we want to decide what our focuses on the year as we get to the last quarter. What should we agendize as important things that we want to tackle as a board?
Well, I just say that, I'll speak specifically just on the accommodation piece. The intent was to try and do it quarterly, not completely held to that, but we could do another batch, cover 2 quarters in September and another quarter. Like, I would say we could do 1 to 2 on accommodations, have the committee do the initial review like we did before. So I'd suggest or you do 1 in the fall and then 1 in January that would pick up Q4 or something. So at least 1. If we did at least 1, then we'll have done it twice in a calendar year. I think the initial goal is to try and do it 4 times. So 1 to 2 more, I'd say, accommodations.
And we've already,
I could just weigh in on the annual retreat planning.
yes, please.
I think it'd be great to start that in November because it's nice to plan for the upcoming year relatively early in the year. So, January, February, which means you need to start thinking about it in the fall. So I would just put that on one of those agendas.
I second that. I think that's very important.
And we've already talked about the policy review schedule and the board training schedule. What about the annual report? When does that start up, Director?
Well, they're just batches of information that we have, but the statistical data won't be completed to the end of the calendar year. So, and we work with the police department. They usually produce, they wrap up the reports with, or the data rather, they provided to us historically within January and February. But we can start having considerations about, I know we learned a lot in this process from last go round. So we have, I think, a better understanding of what the board is seeking and what the council is seeking. But we can get ahead of some of these discussions. If I understand correctly, the subcommittee by Board Member Moses and Vice Chair Wilson is contemplating also a schedule of this. We can have the preliminary discussions before we wrap up the year and then have the formal presentation early on in the year for your review.
Okay.
I think that's great. Do we have consensus? Is everyone comfortable with that scheduling? Vice Chair?
Yes, I don't know why you read something that I don't have in what I'm looking at.
It's in the agenda.
Yes, but where though? Cause did you, Jose, since the packet you sent on Friday, has there been an update to the public packet?
No, so the way that this item was scheduled, the only supporting material that was provided was really the calendar for the rest of the
Oh,
year.
okay, so what you were reading, you were just reading.
Right.
You
We
weren't- it
included
wasn't
a
in
list
right,
in the
okay.
agenda itself, just to sort of guide the discussions to what's pending and what's coming forward.
And speaking of that discussion, I would also like my colleagues to entertain the idea of approaching the topic of our annual report at the retreat. It doesn't have to be hours and hours, but if we start developing that framework, it's along the same time frame that we just discussed. I think that could be beneficial. Just wanted to put that out.
Did the staff want us to look at you have the calendar for all of the meetings the rest of the year. Did you want us to have any feedback? Or is that,
Well, that's
just the regular meeting schedule.
that's what you chose,
that's just
yeah.
informational?
Right, and then one thing we're gonna do better on our end to avoid any conflicts with, popular non-holidays or dates like February the 14th. We'll be more mindful about that, but yeah, that'll be helpful.
Is there anything else about the regular meeting schedule that we need to address?
No,
And not at this point, we just need to make sure we agendize it so we can give it to the clerk and, before the year ends.
You got it. Is there anything else on this, area or topic that, you guys would like to discuss? No, we're good? Excellent. And that's gonna take us to agenda item number 10. Is there an action I gotta do on 9E, or are we good?
There isn't any particular action. Really what we wanted out of this discussion is to hear your feedback.
Okay,
Um,
you got that. All right, let's move on. So agenda item 10, that's public comment.
Okay, I'll now proceed to public comment. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time. If there are many speakers, they may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. With that said, I'll start with those physically present first before I move on to our virtual attendees. At this time, do we have any public comment from those physically present? We'll start from my left to right, so.
I like to rescind my particular presentation to Mrs. Green. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and add 6 minutes on the.
Hi,
Okay,
my name is April Green. I'm here today asking that the Police Accountability Board members, I'm gonna assume, did you see the pictures and some emails that I had emailed to the Deputy Acting Chief? And you can see it dated back a little over a week ago on a Sunday where it started. This individual got access to my property through my next door neighbor, who I have had a difficult relationship with. And that's another issue. But this particular day, this person comes on the property, this person of interest, I have no idea who he is to this day, requesting his name, asking for a criminal investigation, who this person is. I asked him to stop and he refused. He drilled me, as you can see, the bar, that's my fence and that's my turquoise wall. And he drilled me in so I wouldn't have access to open my gate to get to my wall to do basic repairs. The issue with the neighbor and I was the property line, but I'm on my side of the property. I have 3.5 inches of this property line that happens to face her yard. I asked the deputy chief to get involved to investigate it, and they have ignored me. She has ignored me. You can read it for yourself. And as of today, there is no investigation. I'm coming to you. I wrote this whole speech, but I think I got it. That you are over her. You are over this police department. And I have been asking, and I'm asking you to ask her to do an investigation. I believe there's a criminal act here involved. I have a right to have it investigated. They are refusing to do this. This is a criminal act. This person came on my home. It's like someone walking in your door. And you're at home, in the privacy of your home, you're supposed to feel safe. And he just walked in and they didn't do anything. They haven't done. I almost feel like that lady who said that she in her home through the IHS people, and this person come in and the police ain't doing nothing. That's the same concept, the way I feel. I'm in my own bed and this person is in my yard. And I go over and like, what are you doing here? And then he says, well, he played the Berkeley police officer and he's not even a police officer. He felt he had the authority to lock me into my property. Sadly, the deputy chief must feel the same way because she's refusing to do a criminal investigation or even open one up. So I'm asking you to tell her, please, to do her job and investigate why she refuses. I asked for the name of this individual as well, and nothing is being done. If I because I have a difficult relation with this person. If I stepped on her property, I would be getting arrested. So I'm hoping there isn't favoritism being played here, because I do have a difficult relationship with the Berkeley Police Department. It has been this way for years. Some like me, some don't, because I am such an advocate against police violence. I have been on TV, I've been in the media with Chesa Boudin about police injustice of Black and brown men being murdered. So I'm not liked by all the officers, but that does not mean that I should be mistreated. I am a property owner. I'm a property owner and a homeowner. I've been here 31 years. These neighbors moved here 12 years ago from New York. So I'm kind of in shock of how I'm being treated. Regardless how anyone feels about me, I have a right to feel safe in my home. I work hard to pay my property taxes to live here and to live in peace. So I'm asking you to please have her look into why, investigate why this person who's in charge of the police department acting is refusing to give me the name of this person and conduct a criminal investigation. I think that's all I really need to say. Did I say enough, Willie? Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And I do not see any additional public comment from those physically present. I'll now move on to our virtual attendees. At this time, are there any individuals who are coming over Zoom that would like to provide public comment? Again, please use the raise hand icon so that we may recognize you. Chair, at this time, I do not see any raised hands.
Okay, that takes us to agenda item 11, which is closed session. Thank you all for your attendance. Appreciate you being here.
For those attending on Zoom, you're more than welcome to remain in the webinar. The recording will be paused and the audio and visual will be turned off. We'll be returning to announce closed session actions. Again.
And let me call to order the open session and the Police Accountability Board meeting. Takes us to agenda item number 11, which is the announcement of closed session. The board accepted staff's recommendations in case 0006 and case 0013. And now that takes us to our last agenda item, which is adjournment. May I have a motion?
So moved.
And good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Oh, 1 second.
Chair Moore.
Yes.
All right.
We're good? Yeah. And we're good. Thank you all.
Thank you.